Liberal Viewer presents.
So, welcome to the November 4th edition of Liberal Viewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out the weekend's 16 best, most newsworthy clips for what should be a really educational, fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. Because I used an ACLU-based thumbnail for the show tonight, telling you to vote like your rights depend on it, and I've even put the top link in the video description as to how to become an ACLU voter. I wanted to make clear that all the opinions I'm expressing are my own. Sometimes I talk about working as an ACLU activist with my local ACLU chapter. That means that I get to sometimes do things to help the ACLU. That doesn't mean that I speak for the ACLU, and I will actually have in my political comedy clips this week a clip, or actually a couple clips, of the ACLU's executive director, Anthony Romero. He speaks for the ACLU, so if you want to know what the ACLU thinks, you can listen to him. I'm going to give my personal opinions, as I always do, my political analysis, media criticism. It's all mine, and speaking for myself, my personal opinions. There will also be my personal opinions on a couple, in addition to that Bill Maher clip, that's HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. I'll have a monologue clip, and then a couple Anthony Romero clips with Bill Maher interlaced with that. And then also a clip from Saturday Night Live last night. Not the greatest show, no Alec Baldwin, which I was hoping for, and Alec Baldwin as Donald Trump. They did have this one kind of interesting commercial, or I thought appropriate commercial as to the state of mind of a lot of Democrats like me. I'm a registered Democrat. I talked about that a little last week when Democrats were targeted by that bomber, talking about how, we're really confident about the midterms. And I thought it was, I'm not going to show you the entire Saturday Night Live segment. I do have a link down in the video description to the whole Democrats are confident segment. I also have a link down there to my 16 clips I'll be using. The first 3 are from political comedy sources. The rest come from the big 5 corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. I have news summaries from all of them except CBS. I have clips from all of them on some of the big midterm issues. Is there going to be a blue wave? I think that there's at least going to be a moderate blue wave, maybe even a big one for reasons I'll discuss. I've actually put a poll up. You can click on a link here in the corner if you want to answer the poll. I've given the 4 possible outcomes. I think if you believe the polls, and there might not be, not my poll, but if you believe the scientific polls that the news media does, then I put them in most likely to least likely outcome order, with the Democrats taking the House but not the Senate as the most likely outcome, and taking the Senate but not the House as the least likely outcome. In between, you can see, I think the second most likely outcome is that the Democrats don't take the House or the Senate. That would be like a very dark day. And then the third most likely outcome is that the Democrats take both the House and the Senate. That would be the really great big blue wave that I'm hoping for. And a lot of Democrats are hoping for, or at least taking the House. And that was the subject of this Saturday Night Live fake commercial parody. I've taken about 24 seconds of it, the beginning and the end. Not the very beginning, but anyway, this is the 24 seconds I wanted to show you and talk with you about after we watch it together over here.
There's a blue wave on the horizon, and I have never felt more confident.
The Democrats are taking back the House. It's a win we need and a win we're going to get. I'm sure of it.
And they say don't trust the polls, but I'm choosing to. We're finally going to put this administration in check.
And you can see that was the very ending thumbnail or whatever of the video, or ending title, ending graphic. Please vote or whatever. And I almost decided to use that as the thumbnail for my video, but instead I decided to use this ACLU voter thumbnail that you saw probably before you clicked on the video. And like I said, down in the video description, there's a link to how you can become an ACLU voter. And remember, the ACLU is a nonpartisan organization. It doesn't endorse candidates. It doesn't endorse political parties. It fights for civil liberties issues. And so if you go down through that link, you'll see how to find out how your local candidates rate on these civil liberties issues. And the ACLU won't be telling you who to vote for, but you can use that information to decide how you want to make your vote count in terms of protecting civil liberties. And that's something that I've supported for a long time. I've supported the ACLU as a nonpartisan organization. I wanted to encourage all of you to check out how the ACLU has helped you understand how your vote can affect civil liberties. So that's why I put that link as the top link down in the video description. I also have links to everything else, like I said, including the second Bill Maher real-time clip I'm going to show with Anthony Romero. I don't think is available free on YouTube, but this next 90 seconds worth of jokes from the monologue, the entire monologue is available free down at a link down in the video description on the HBO real-time YouTube channel. This is I spliced like the ending joke together with some other jokes about the caravan and moving troops to the border, which will be a big issue in the news clips I'm going to show a little bit later, including the head of the RNC, Ronna McDaniel, will be answering questions about that. The head of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, Chris Van Hollen, will be answering questions about that. But here is Bill Maher making jokes about the caravan and moving troops to the border last Friday on HBO's Real Time, and I'll discuss that with you after we watch it together a little more, or after we watch it together over here.
He keeps calling it an invasion. Yes, an invasion of strollers. Yes, the great invaders of history, Attila the Hun, Ivan the Terrible, Dora the Explorer. I mean, every day, Fox News treats this like it's the zombie apocalypse, but zombies eat brains. Why would they be heading toward America? I mean, Trump is sending troops, the army, to stare down the people with sippy cups. I mean, I don't want to say the army is being used as props, but instead of move out, the commanding officer now says, places. Places, everyone. Today, he somehow finds a way to go lower, even just in this 1 week or two. You know, first saying that there are terrorists in the caravan, calling an invasion, calling out the troops, the army, tried to revoke birthright citizenship. And then yesterday, the worst of all, saying anyone who throws a rock will be treated as if they have a rifle. Let me tell you something. If there was a teenager from Central America right now who could throw a rock that fast and that hard, he'd be in the Dodgers farm system already. All right.
I like that last baseball joke. And the rock thing is horrible. And luckily, Trump was repudiated by the military. That'll come up a little bit later in one of the news clips. I actually liked all those jokes. I cut the monologue so that it started right after a joke I didn't really like. There was kind of like bathroom humor, and there were several jokes I didn't like in the monologue, but so I guess in some sense my video editing of the monologue there is media criticism, or I could make that fair use argument. So not that it really matters, because HBO has been fairly nice to me, letting me use the real-time clips, the ones that are available free on YouTube, like the full monologue. And then I actually put together about 3 minutes 20 seconds, mostly of Anthony Romero, who he's the executive director of the ACLU. I often talk about how I spend a lot of time volunteering for the ACLU as a grassroots activist with my local chapter. And like I said at the beginning, I don't speak for the ACLU, but Anthony Romero is certainly speaking for the ACLU. Sometimes he said things that tinged a little on the partisan side, which made me think maybe he should have said at sometime in the show that he was giving his personal opinion and not speaking for the ACLU. But I don't think he actually ever went over the line. And the ACLU has been trying a lot harder to have more of a political impact to the extent that fits within its nonpartisanship policy. So it's put a lot more effort into getting out voters and educating voters without telling them who to vote for, but educating them on these civil liberties issues. And I think that might have some impact. And Anthony Romero talks about how Donald Trump has been a big fundraiser or membership raiser for the ACLU, among other things, and the possible backlash that gives me hope that I'll talk about a little more after we watch this final political comedy clip and then get to the news clips tonight over here.
I feel like he's doubling down on the people who are already with him, who can't vote twice, I hope. How much can you gin up that one section? And, of course, when you gin them up that much, some of them send bombs.
But it's half your country.
But it's 35%.
It's not half.
Country.
Yeah.
His base
Half the
can't
people
win the
that vote.
election.
And I think it's going to
alone.
backfire. I mean, look, even the great story you ran on birthright citizenship, where he wants to repeal that right. Bring it on. Try it. Well, I feel like if he would try to sign this executive order that you covered, fantastic. We'll sue him.
But that's the problem. He's not intentionally,
we'll mop
like
the
he's not intending
floor
to follow
with that
through.
executive order, and there's no way he's going to succeed. And look at the fractiousness that he just even. The Wall Street Journal this week came out with an editorial saying, can't do that, shouldn't do that, the birthright citizenship. Paul Ryan, until he was kind of cudgeled into sniveling submission, also disagreed with the president. So I think that he's overplayed his
the only thing I would
hand
say
in a
on
way
that,
that
there's a difference.
And I feel like with this, especially with this violence the last couple of weeks,
Exactly.
I don't think that's playing well for him. I think they feel like he's crazy. We liked crazy for a while, but this is too crazy. And anytime it looks too crazy, too violent, I think they're going to blame him. I think they are. And his idea that, try to put across the idea that the Democrats are the mob, for once, Bland works for Democrats. They are not the mob. Even the regular Joe gets that.
But
These people
I
are
think the
not
fear-
that type.
I think the fear works on both sides. I mean, Democrats are, I'm doing more than I've ever wanted to do in my entire life because I'm fucking scared shitless, you know? And so I think people are in fear is working. It's a motivator, it's a galvanizer for everybody. And also, these Republicans that are leaving the party, you can't park your racism in religion, for that long. You can't co-opt religion from the Democrats. We believe in things too. I mean, I don't, but a lot of people do. So you can't just decide, we're going to take God and we're going to take the veterans and we're going to take. No, you can't, because you're not acting like Christians at all.
Well, that's
totally.
I mean,
the way he's galvanized the base is incredible. I mean, I should send Donald Trump a thank you card. Our membership at the ACLU quadrupled in the time of Donald Trump. It doubled in the time of George Bush. It's younger, it's more diverse, it's more engaged. It is the golden era of citizen activism. And we have him to thank for it.
Yeah.
And it's in response to him. And so I think we have to remain optimistic. Sure, fear is a major motivator, you bet.
I'm optimistically fearful.
And exactly.
okay, so this caravan that he keeps talking about, it's just amazing.
It's ISIS coming.
Amazing to me how it's this refillable cup of everything bad. Yes, he said there's terrorists in there from the middle. Why would they come from the Middle East to come up through Honduras, 2,000 miles? He said there are gang members, lepers, people with smallpox, TB. Listen to this. Gene Pirro said today, there's also pedophiles, career criminals, and wife beaters. Who isn't in this caravan?
Meanwhile, you just described like the entire White House, so.
Well,
And actually, Chelsea Handler there got like the best punchline maybe of the entire show. I had seen a tweet about that earlier. I tried to track it down. A couple different people made the joke when Janine Pirro was talking about pedophiles, career criminals, and pedophiles and wife beaters. That basically describes the career criminal, that's Paul Manafort, I guess, and the pedophile, that's Roy Moore, and then Rob Portman, who many people don't know who he was, but he was like the staff secretary who the chief of staff, John Kelly, didn't fire fast enough, and he eventually lied about and was a scandal for a little while. And he's now staff secretary is like the guy who handles all the documents before the president sees them. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but I think that was a good punchline from Chelsea Handler. I liked the Anthony Romero clips there. I liked all of. I pretty much am a big Anthony Romero fan. Although I'm not going to get into all that. The times that I've met Anthony Romero, but have not quite shaken his hand for various reasons. But the inspiring story I wanted to tell that what Anthony Romero, who's the executive director of the National ACLU, reminded me of there is a story I heard and an analysis I kind of thought of myself. A story I heard from the director of my affiliate of the ACLU of Northern California, Abdi Sultani, right after Donald Trump was elected, talked about how this could end up being a good thing because of the backlash that Anthony Romero was talking about in another way, and told the story of what happened here in California. You know, I remember this because I'm old enough to remember when Pete Wilson was the governor of California, and the Republicans in California decided to play to their base for short-term political gain, and they supported this thing. I think it was Prop 187, if I'm remembering the number correctly, that was supposed to deny all these like public schools and medical care and all this stuff to undocumented immigrants, and which was unconstitutional, I think, already at the time under the Supreme Court case of Plyler versus Doe, but they didn't care, and actually Californians rejected that proposition. I'm pretty sure they did, but it didn't pass. I'm pretty sure it didn't pass. But whether it passed or not, whether they got the short-term political gain, I should know that, whether it passed or not. But maybe during the next clip I'll look it up and I'll let you know. But the point is that branded the Republicans here in California as basically bigoted against Latinos, and that was sort of their last gasp before California became like a majority-minority state, and that doesn't even make sense, majority-minority, which is kind of what's going on with Trump, that some people see the Trump administration as a last gasp of white supremacy, or I don't even need to put quotes around it, before you get your majority United States, which is going to happen. When is it? I can't even remember. Is it 2050? It's coming. Sorry to scare you. It's not the caravan that's coming. It's just demographics that are coming, and whites are not going to be the majority anymore. And as California's made that not painful transition whatsoever, I don't know what people are scared of. We are now have a supermajority of Democrats in the legislature because of the backlash against Prop 187 days with Governor Pete Wilson. The Republicans are branded with that for like a generation, and I think that might, in my most hoped-for world, that's going to be what happens to the Republicans after Trump. Is they're going to be a non-viable party, kind of like they are here in California, because they latched on to this white supremacist, racist, demagogue, would-be dictator, whatever. I mean, I've talked about that many times. Those are my opinions. You can disagree with them if you want. And now I'm going to move on to the actual news clips, which are more about the horse race of the midterms than any of these bigger issues I've just been talking about. I'm going to start with NBC's Meet the Press. As usual, the longest of the news summaries. Well, actually, other than Fox News, which is sort of the alternative universe, that's not really news, that's Fox News. Don't want to overdo the air quotes tonight, but the Fox News summary will be the fourth one. These are mostly horse race stories, but they also talk about how this is a verdict or a referendum. I think the word, in the NBC Meet, it's the first national referendum on Trump, and then Chuck Todd sets the goals for what's a good day for both Republicans and Democrats in a way that I think is pretty reasonable. And a couple other things, show some clips that I will talk about with you after we watch the NBC Meet the Press news summary from this morning over here.
Sunday morning from our election headquarters right here at Rockefeller Center in New York City, where on Tuesday night we'll be reporting on the first national referendum on the Trump presidency. At stake, all 435 House seats, 35 Senate seats this year, 36 governor's races, and of course, thousands of state legislative seats are on the ballot. For the Democrats, a great night for them would be winning back the House convincingly, somehow even gaining a Senate seat, even if they don't gain control, and winning nearly a dozen governor's mansions. The Republican dream? Hanging on to the House, solidifying their hold on the Senate with a gain of 3 or 4 seats, hitting 54, 55 in total, and holding their losses in governor's races to fewer than 5. We've got 2 days to go, and we have a brand new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll this morning that was completed early this morning. We were calling that late. Among likely voters, Democrats have a 7-point lead, 50 to 43, on their pick for Congress. That's a slight improvement for the Republicans compared to 2 weeks ago, when the Democrats led 50 to 41 nationally. Like so much about this midterm election, how people vote reflects how they feel about President Trump. Among likely voters, the president's job rating is basically unchanged from 2 weeks ago. It's 46% approve, 52% disapprove. In previous midterms, a 46% job rating for a sitting president would mean his party was headed for a big defeat, that they'd be throttled. But is it possible President Trump has changed the rules, or that the geography of our political divide has changed the rules? By the way, even though Election Day is Tuesday, some 33 million people have already voted. It's a record for the early vote for midterms. We could be on our way to our first ever midterm with 100 million voters, a mini presidential, if you will. We have correspondents across the country covering just a few of the races we're going to be watching on Tuesday night. These are the big 4 states that we're focused on right now. And we'll begin in Arizona, where Democrats are hoping.
So actually, NBC did some good reports from all those different states, and I think, like I said before I showed that clip, Chuck Todd did a good job of showing what a good day would be for both sides. They didn't really talk about the enthusiasm gap in the NBC Wall Street Journal poll that Chuck Todd was so proud of them just finishing up. I heard Steve Kornacki talk about how that was like the important number. The enthusiasm gap had really narrowed between Democrats and Republicans. I think the last poll before this one, it was down to 4 points, and I think it's gone down to 3 points, and that's a little worrying. But anyway, I'm going to talk about that a little more later. I did see along the way that I have been saved by the wisdom of my viewers. Thom Trask looked up for me what happened with Prop 187 here. Or I don't know if he looked it up. Maybe he just remembered it. But yeah, Prop 187 did pass. I don't know. And it was found unconstitutional and then died because there was no longer a Republican governor. And the rest of the story is like I told it. But thank you, Thom Trask, for giving that accurate information about the fate of Prop 187 that I couldn't remember, even though I was going to tell you that story all along, and I should have looked it up. But anyway, it's been a hectic day, and I started late. I can blame Sandy for reasons that I will explain when I show the bonus Sandy and Dash clip, that Sandy gave us a very scary night last night. We were very worried about Sandy for reasons I'll explain at the end of the show for the Dash and Sandy fans. But now I should get on with my news summaries. I criticized that NBC Meet the Press clip. I also thought the ABC news summary was very similar, and it's a little bit shorter. Instead of the first national referendum on Trump, it's the most consequential election, and it's like a presidential election, which you'll see that's a theme that is in multiple news summaries. Here's the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary from this morning, 1 minute and 40 seconds that I will discuss with you after we watch it together over here.
Hello again. You can see that we are broadcasting this morning from our election headquarters here in New York. This is where we're going to be tracking and analyzing the results as they come in on Tuesday night. Team already here ready to go for what is shaping up to be the most consequential midterm election in years. It feels like a presidential election. Americans are engaged, passions high, early voting through the roof, and President Trump is campaigning as if he were on the ballot. One way he is. If Democrats win the House or the Senate Tuesday night, Trump will wake up to a very different presidency Wednesday morning. Our brand new ABC News Washington Post poll shows the president coming into these midterms with the lowest approval of any president since Harry Truman. He's at 40%, with 53% disapproving of Trump's performance. The president's average approval since inauguration is the lowest on record, and 59% of likely voters say it's important to them to vote for a candidate who shares their opinion of Trump. That is fueling a Democratic advantage with 48 hours to go. Democratic House candidates lead Republicans by 8 points among likely voters, 52 to 44. But that is down from 13 points last month. The Republican base is clearly re-energized in the wake of the Kavanaugh hearings, and the Democratic advantage among women, especially independent women, is shrinking. On the issues, Republicans have an edge on handling the economy. Democrats have been advertising on health care. They have an advantage there. And as President Trump trains his fire on that migrant caravan, our poll shows split views. 47% trust Democrats to handle immigration, but voters trust Republicans by a 10-point margin on border security. We have a lot to analyze here with our team. I want to start by bringing in our chief national affairs correspondent, Thom.
And they have a lot more polls. Everybody had polls, was really concentrated on the horse racing polls, except Fox News Sunday for some reason. I'm not sure why that is. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But that was a fairly good news summary. I don't think it really focused on those big issues I was talking about in terms of when I showed the political comedy clips earlier about the backlash and the racism, and I don't think it talks so much about the differences in the outcome, but even as the Meet the Press clip, what's a good day for Democrats and Republicans. But I want to show the CNN State of the Union clip as the second to last of the news summaries. The State of the Union clip is being on the edge of our seats, and makes this interesting. It shows an Obama clip and a Trump clip, and talks about a weird historical reference I kind of like from Jake Tapper about Obama being like the most aggressive former president in a election since Herbert Hoover, I guess, coming out against FDR. And then there's a Trump clip at the end I want to talk about after we watch the full 91-second news summary from CNN State of the Union, the beginning of the program, together over here.
Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is on the edge of our seats. The polls officially open for midterm election day in less than 48 hours. Voters will deliver their first verdict on the Trump presidency and test the Democratic message. The stakes are enormous for both parties. President Trump fighting to keep Republicans in control of Congress. Democrats trying to take back that power and significantly curb President Trump's agenda. Now, with time running out, both sides are relying on their biggest political stars to try to turn out the vote. Former President Obama on the trail, offering withering criticism for his successor, the likes of which we haven't seen a former president do since maybe Herbert Hoover in the 1930s.
When words stop meaning anything, when truth doesn't matter, when people can just lie with abandon, democracy can't work.
President Trump, meanwhile, rallying his base, talking about undocumented immigrants and the threat of the caravan.
If you want to protect criminal aliens, you should vote Democrat. If you want to protect law-abiding Americans, vote Republican. It's really very simple.
Today, President Trump will be in Georgia campaigning to win one of the tightest and most closely watched races in the nation, the battle to be Georgia's next governor. Joining me now, Democratic candidate for Georgia.
And I'll actually have two clips of Stacey Abrams. That's why I used her name in the title of my video. She is definitely a candidate to watch for governor, along with Andrew Gillum over in Florida. I think they could be future leaders of the Democratic Party, especially if they can win with progressive messages in the South. And I'll talk about that a little more when I show Chuck Todd asking a question that has to do with progressive messages in the South. Is that Chuck Todd asking about the progressive? Well, I think that actually Jake Tapper does a better job a little bit later talking to Stacey Abrams than Chuck Todd. I have them asking basically the same question of Stacey Abrams. Jake Tapper starts off asking her the question right at the end of the clip I just showed you, and Those are the two clips I'm going to show you after the next clip, which is the Fox News Sunday News Summary, which, like I said, is kind of an alternative universe. Fox News, even with Chris Wallace, the supposedly straight news anchor of Fox News Sunday, being supposedly a straight news anchor, not biased. That's what straight news is. Anyway, I don't want to get into what my supposedly straight news anchor controversies over the years, but even in the supposedly straightest of straight news on Fox News Sunday, they definitely spin for Trump. I think in first the introduction from Chris Wallace, he starts off by pointing out to their viewers that if the Democrats are successful, they're going to block Trump's agenda, which isn't quite, how I think of it, or I think that's kind of a biased view. And then there's this weird description of Trump as commanding, and it was almost like a Handmaid's Tale reference, a secret Handmaid's Tale reference from Chris Wallace, because of course all the leaders in the Handmaid's Tale are called commanders, and then Chris Wallace puts it to their reporter Peter Doocy, son of the Fox and Friends anchor Steve Doocy, who gives a montage of clips of candidates that I think definitely favors Republicans. You can let me know if you think I'm crazy. I don't really think there's a secret Handmaid's Tale reference, so that I'm not saying that, but the whole commander thing and the way that Fox News has of making Trump seem like the strong commander who Democrats are obstructing, I think that is definitely a subtext of the Chris Wallace introduction in his news summary. This is 2 minutes and 40 seconds long, and I'll talk about it with you probably very briefly since I spent so much time introducing it after we watch it together over here.
And hello again, today from Fox News headquarters in New York. The 2018 midterm campaign has finally reached the endgame. At stake, whether Republicans will hold on to control of Congress. Should one or both chambers flip, Democrats will be able to block much of President Trump's agenda and launch investigations into his administration. But if the GOP keeps its majorities in the House and Senate, and that would buck traditional losses for the president's party in the first midterm, well then, Mr. Trump will be in a more commanding position than ever. We begin our coverage of the battle for Congress 2 days out with Peter Doocy on the campaign trail in Hialeah, Florida. Peter.
Good morning, Chris. Democrats believe they have built the biggest battlefield for the House in a decade, and party leaders say it's about to pay off.
We will win.
Democratic challengers everywhere are sticking to a single focus: health care.
1 week to prove we are an Iowa that steps up for our neighbors with pre-existing conditions.
Hey! Vulnerable Republicans believe that if there's one issue that helps them hold the House, it's the strong economy.
Keeping the economy going, trade is a big part of that.
A critical constituency in the battle for the House: women.
I do see some falling off among the college-educated women.
President Trump is more outwardly optimistic.
It looks like we're doing okay in the House. We're going to have to see.
The Senate map is tougher for Democrats, especially the 10 defending seats in states Trump won.
What it really comes down to is who do you trust?
A huge focus for Republican Senate hopefuls: immigration.
You mean the people of Texas want a wall? You mean the people of Texas want to stop the caravan?
President Trump has made repeated visits to red states with Democratic senators for sizable rallies.
Hello, Montana. I said I was coming back, and I'm back.
Rallies some of those Democrats are trying to laugh off.
He's been here so often, he must be building a golf course.
Millions of people in places like Florida have already voted, so Republican Senate candidate Rick Scott is out here taking orders and asking for votes before Tuesday. Chris?
Peter Doocy reporting from Florida.
And what a surprise, Peter Doocy's site reporting from Florida is with a Republican. Why? What are the odds that he would end up being with a Republican and not with a Democrat in Florida? And the montage, like I said, do you see? I think that Claire McCaskill dance sequence was just supposed to make her look bad, and they definitely took the hard edges off of Trump's demagoguery on immigration that I will get to in some clips a little bit later. But I think I pretty much criticized that clip before I showed it anyway, and I promised these next two clips of Stacey Abrams, the candidate for governor in Georgia, and these are two different journalists. First, Chuck Todd doing not so great a job talking about something Trump said regarding this race, that he thought that Stacey Abrams wasn't qualified, which is kind of a joke and fits into like a racist pattern of Trump statements that black people are low IQ, unqualified, and et cetera, et cetera. And Chuck Todd did nothing really to point out the racist part of it. Jake Tapper in the next clip after, he also doesn't use the word racist, but I think he does a much better job of making that the real subtext of his questioning. With his follow-up, he gives her every opportunity to use the word racist, and then follows up with the question about a Trump administration official saying something just recently in the Florida race that it's like the monkey it up sequel, second racist comment but that's the second clip. The first clip is just 43 seconds from NBC's Meet the Press, where I don't think Chuck Todd did justice to the racism in Trump's comment that he asked Stacey Abrams about over here.
The president's going to be in Macon, Georgia today. He said you just simply weren't qualified to be governor. He didn't say why. How did you take that assessment?
I find his assessments to be vapid and shallow. I am the most qualified candidate. I am a business owner. I'm a tax attorney who was trained at Yale Law School. I am a civic leader who helped register more than 200,000 Georgians. I am a very accomplished political leader who worked across the aisle to improve access to education, to transportation, and I blocked the single largest tax increase in Georgia history. There is no one more qualified standing for this office in Georgia, and I look forward to having the voters of Georgia say the same.
You know, it's interesting when Oprah Winfrey came to campaign for...
Oh, and by the way, speaking of Oprah Winfrey campaigning for Stacey Abrams, if you follow me on Facebook, on my Facebook page, I put a link down in the video description. It's facebook.com/liberalviewer. The last thing I put up before the link to my Sunday live clip roundup was a 4-minute clip of Oprah first saying she's not going to run in a way that made me kind of hope she was going to run, because she followed up with some stories about voting rights that, and this one story about voting rights that I thought was very emotive, kind of made me tear up a little bit. And so that's down on my Facebook page, facebook.com/liberalviewer. I almost decided to replay that clip, but it's available, and I'm kind of a little pressed for time. I'm starting late. Because of the Sandy story I'm going to tell at the end, although Sandy didn't get sick. Sandy was missing. I'll tell you why Sandy was missing when I show the bonus Dash and Sandy clip at the end of the show. But I want to show the next Stacey Abrams clip, where Jake Tapper does a lot better job of asking that same question and putting it in the context of racism. First, he actually shows a clip of what Trump said. Then he follows it up by giving Stacey Abrams basically, you're sure you don't want to call him a racist? That's not the actual follow-up question, but that's basically giving her the opportunity to say that. And then talking about a former governor of Georgia, Perdue, saying something that, like I said, was the monkeyed up sequel that I will talk about with you after we watch this 2-minute clip from CNN's State of the Union this morning over here.
Stacey Abrams. I want to note that we did invite Abrams' opponent, Georgia Secretary of State Brian Kemp, to join us, but he declined this Sunday as well as on 2 previous Sundays. Leader Abrams, thanks for joining us. President Trump is going to be in Georgia campaigning for your opponent this afternoon. Here's what the president had to say about your candidacy earlier this week.
She is not qualified to be the governor of Georgia. She's not qualified.
What's your response?
He's wrong. As President Obama pointed out, I am the most qualified candidate running. If you look at both my academic background, my work history, I've been deputy city attorney. I was the Democratic leader for 7 years. I've been successful as a businesswoman, as a writer, and as a tax attorney. I know what I'm talking about, and I have the plans to prove it.
What do you make of his attacking you that way?
I think that they can see the same numbers we are seeing. Early voting is up dramatically. We have a plan in place for a remarkable turnout on Election Day. We have folks knocking doors across the state of Georgia, and I think they're getting scared. And I think desperation tends to lead to comments that aren't necessarily grounded in reality.
You're running for Georgia governor, so I was curious about your reaction to something a former governor of Georgia said last night. Take a listen to Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue at a campaign event for Republican Florida gubernatorial candidate Ron DeSantis. He's running against Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum.
Public policy matters. Leadership matters. And that's why this election is so cotton-picking important to the state of Florida. I hope you all don't mess it up.
This election is so cotton-picking important to the state of Florida. Did you have any reaction to hearing that?
I think that there is certainly a throwback element to the language that we're hearing coming out of the Republican Party that is unfortunately disparaging to communities. It may be unintentional, but it signals a deeper misinformation about what Andrew Gillum can accomplish, what I can accomplish, and what we're going to do is stand on our records and on our plans, and we're going to win these elections.
President Obama hit the trail for your campaign.
So that was actually pretty charitable of Stacey Abrams there to say that former Georgia Governor Sonny Perdue might have been unintentionally racist or subtext racist when he said that used the term cotton picking. Although I noticed after that he said we can't mess this up, and he didn't say monkey it up. That would have been like he would have hit like the double, like if he said cotton picking and monkey it up in the same statement. So maybe it was unintentional, because if he really meant it, he would have put the monkey it up instead of mess it up afterwards. I don't know I don't know if that was a mistake, but the whole thing about Trump saying that she's not qualified after going to Yale Law School, after being the Democratic minority leader in the Georgia legislature, that seems kind of racist to me, especially in the context of all the other racist, disparaging things that Trump has said about other black people. And even Michael, there was this story this last week where Michael Cohen revealed several different racist things that Trump said, like the reason black people don't vote for me is because they're too stupid to vote for me, and a couple other, I don't even want to go into all that, but unfortunately it seems like the Trump presidency and racist and bigoted remarks are going to continue being a topic of the Sunday Live clip roundup. And these next two clips are about I can't even believe this, that I have to focus on this. It's like such a transparent political attempt to change the topic to immigration right before the midterms, just like this birthright citizenship question, which I'll talk about a little more possibly later. And by the way, if you have your ACLU Constitution that I give out to people who donate $10 to me on PayPal at a link down in the video description, or become $10 a month contributors on my Patreon page, become patrons on Patreon at $10 a month, or just a one-time contribution of $10 on PayPal, get you this Constitution where you can read the 14th Amendment yourself, which makes pretty clear that anyone born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof is a citizen of the United States. And if you think subject to the jurisdiction thereof is an exception that supports what Trump is saying, well, if that means undocumented immigrants, if they're not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, they can't be charged with crimes if they commit them. And undocumented immigrants are charged with crimes, which is actually the subject of this awful Trump video tweet this last week, his like closing argument tweet, where he refers to something that happened here in Sacramento, where an undocumented immigrant killed a couple local deputies, a Sacramento County Sheriff's deputy and a Placer County Sheriff's deputy. And then he was like all crazy in court saying, I wish I could kill some more. And anyway, Trump blames that on the Democrats. And I think Jake Tapper did a really good job of questioning Ronna McDaniel, the head of the Republican Party, about that ad, showing a brief clip of it. I wanted to show that to you. It's actually 5.5 minutes long. And it shows the way a good journalist can try to cut through the talking points, which I think he did well with both Ronna McDaniel and then later with Tom Perez, the head of the Democratic Party. In between, I'm going to have a clip from Fox News Sunday where Chris Wallace inexplicably decided to question the Democrat, not the Republican, about this racist ad from Trump, referring to the guy's name here in Sacramento is Louis Bracamontes, who killed a Sacramento and Placer County sheriff deputy. And Trump blamed it on the Democrats. Jake Tapper did a great job of fact-checking that and trying to get Ronna McDaniel to talk about why this was ridiculous. By the way, what happened to Ronna McDaniel's Romney? She used to be Ronna Romney McDaniel. It's like John Cougar Mellencamp lost the Cougar. Well, first lost the Mellencamp, then lost the Cougar. Now that Mitt Romney's probably going to be in the Senate, does that mean Ronna Romney McDaniel's going to get her Romney back? I don't know, but she's just Ronna McDaniel, showing her transparent talking points that don't meet the reality test that Jake Tapper puts them to, in a really great journalistic clip from Jake Tapper this morning over here.
So the president's closing argument in the midterms is focused on fears of undocumented immigrants. That's the focus. And he tweeted out this racially charged video about an undocumented immigrant convicted of killing 2 sheriff's deputies. Here's a little snippet of this incendiary video. I mean, factually, it's not true, because actually he was led into the country the most recently under George W. Bush's administration, and Joe Arpaio is the one who released him, I think, most recently. But setting aside the factual errors, several Republicans have condemned the substance of this video. Senator Jeff Flake, Republican of Arizona, called it sickening, saying that, quote, Republicans everywhere should denounce it. Congressman Carlos Curbelo, Republican of Florida, says he hoped this doesn't work. Congressman Ryan Costello, Republican of Pennsylvania, says no Republican in a close district wants to talk about this. Do you have any concerns at all about this web video?
I think the president's highlighting the point, once again, that we don't, and I think everybody agrees with this, Jake. We didn't want this individual in our country. He came in first under Bill Clinton and then under George Bush, and he did kill police. And you see in this video, he said, I'd kill more people if I could. We don't want people being deported and being criminals and then coming back into this country. And the president was very clear in his speech this week. Listen, we know good people are trying to get in this country, too. They see the prosperity. They see the economic growth. They're coming to this country because they see it as a beacon of hope. We need to find a legal way to get people here. We need to find a way to fix our immigration system. Democrats won't work with us. And when he brought that deal to Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, he said, let's end a visa lottery system that just brings people here willy-nilly instead of based on merit. By the way, Canada doesn't have a visa lottery system. He's saying, let's have merit-based immigration. We have more jobs right now than people to fill them. Let's bring people in based on the job needs that we have in this country. Very reasonable proposals that Democrats have supported in the past. And now they're saying, no, we won't support it. And he also had a deal on the DACA.
You don't have, but you don't have any issues whatsoever
about. Why won't they come to the table with him on anything?
You don't have any issues at all about.
I think the president's talking about a multitude of issues, and to say he's only focusing on one thing is false.
But on that web video, you don't have any issue with that?
Time and time again won't work with him.
You don't. It's factually inaccurate and it's racially incendiary. You don't have any issue with that.
I have an issue with our immigration system that's not being fixed, and Democrats won't work with the president. And we have caravans coming. Listen, Jake, in 8 years, asylum claims are up 1,700%. By the way, what about the 12,000 kids that have come here unaccompanied? We have an immigration system that is attracting young children to come here alone without their parents. Why do we have that? Why aren't we fixing that? Is that good for these young kids to be traveling
you know
alone?
What? I completely agree with you that there needs to be a big immigration reform bill, and Democrats and Republicans need to come together. Do you really think President Trump is doing it?
Where are the Democrats talking about this? Are they saying let's solve the problem? They haven't said one thing about
President
the caravan.
Trump.
They're
President
not saying anything about these 12,000 kids.
President
being held
Trump
by
is
DHS.
inaccurately blaming them for putting a cop killer, for letting him into the country. The last time he came into the country was under George W. Bush.
Regardless, we didn't want him in the country. He killed police. That's not good. This is exactly why our immigration system's failing. And he's pointing that out. And by the way, he did come in under Bill Clinton. So he's come in twice.
And then Clinton deported
under
him.
different presidents. But he got here and he shouldn't have been here and he killed 2 policemen. We don't want that. And while
is it the Democrats'
majority
fault?
of those people who are coming here want good things, there are bad actors within some of these caravans.
And he's
Absolutely.
a monster and he was sentenced to death, and good riddance. But was his presence in the United States the Democrats' fault?
It's a systemic failure, and there's only one person right now talking about fixing it, and
it's
that's
a systemic failure. That's my point. It's a systemic failure. Democrats and Republicans. That's the failure. But he blamed it all on Democrats. So how can you expect Democrats?
But who's the party saying let's fix it, Jake? Who's the party solving every problem right now? Opioids we're leading. The economy
I know you want to change the subject to.
Our unemployment's at a record low. Democrats aren't coming to the table on anything.
Republicans
they have
control
sat on their
the
hands,
House, the
having
Senate, and the White
temper
House.
tantrum for 2 years, and they should be fixing the immigration problem.
Democrats, the minority party, should be fixing the immigration problem. You control the White House, the House, and the Senate.
They should be working with the president.
The White House, the House, and the Senate.
We do not have a filibuster-proof Senate. We only have 51 senators.
It's not the Senate. You couldn't get legislation through the House.
Well, what Democrats leading on any issue? How many of them are coming to the table saying, I have a solution, let's work with this president? Name one. Name one who said, let's unify this past week. When the president went forward and said, this is a time to unify, they said, no, we're going to make it political again. I do not see a single Democrat saying, let's bring this country together. I only see them running on resist and obstruct. Even with these good economic numbers, they can't even tout how good our country's doing right now. So, yeah. The president's leading. He's saying, come to the table. We have major issues we need to face. By the way, our economy's humming. People are working. Wages are up. I'll work with Democrats, and they're sitting on their hands.
All right. Ronna McDaniel, thank you so much, and good luck on Tuesday, which I will also say to your Democratic counterpart.
Okay. Fair enough.
Fair enough. And like I said, I will show that even though that was a great job from Jake Tapper there, cross-examining the Republican National Committee Chair, Ronna McDaniel, he will very fairly also do a great job cross-examining the head of the Democratic Party, Thom Perez, about a different issue having to do with Keith Ellison, another official at the Democratic Party, and some charges against him that he abused or physically abused a woman, and how the Democratic Party has handled that. And I think Jake Tapper, in the clip you just saw and in the clip from the other side showing his nonpartisan fairness, was pretty much at the top of his game journalistically in that clip and that next clip I'm going to show you. So kudos to Jake Tapper on that. And it just shows up this next clip I'm going to show you from Fox News Sunday. Chris Wallace used the same issue of that Louis Bracamonte's cop killer ad from Donald Trump, combined with another Donald Trump argument about the caravan, and talking to the head of the, not the Democratic Party, but the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, like the senator from Maryland, Chris Van Hollen, who's also in charge of getting more Democratic senators elected on Tuesday. And here, in an inexplicable switch, it's not a Republican that Chris Wallace is asking about that racist ad from Donald Trump, factually wrong ad. It's a Democrat. He's saying, isn't this working? does no fact-checking, pointing out that it wasn't Democrats who were responsible for letting Louis Bracamontes come into the country. That was George W. Bush. And it was actually Joe Arpaio was the last person to release him, the sheriff in Arizona, the Republican sheriff who is a big Trump fan who Trump actually pardoned for well, I don't want to go into the whole Joe Arpaio pardon, but that's the person who let Louis Bracamontes out, and the last person to let him into the country was George W. Bush. So blaming it on Democrats makes no sense. But Chris Wallace does none of that fact checking you saw from Jake Tapper. Chris Van Hollen, the Democratic senator from Maryland, does a little bit of fact checking, does an okay job of responding, but it's so much worse than what you just saw from CNN. That's my opinion. You can tell me what you think. Oh, and by the way, I was talking about the 14th Amendment before. I saw one of my live viewers, Andy, who's already gotten his ACLU Constitution, was asking, where's the 14th Amendment? Page 30. If you have your ACLU Constitution, 14th Amendment, and the part about citizens, it's on page 30. But anyway, here's Chris Van Hollen talking to Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday, who does a much worse job of presenting the bad facts and racism in the Trump blaming the Democrats for the Sacramento cop killer over here.
President Trump is hitting Democrats hard in these final days on immigration and the caravan headed up through Mexico. Here he is on the campaign trail.
A Democrat victory on Election Day would be a bright, flashing invitation to traffickers, smugglers, drug dealers, and gang members all over the world. Come on in.
And the president ran a controversial ad this week about a Mexican who was deported twice, came back into this country, and then shot and killed 2 California police officers. Here's a bit of the president's clip.
Please step out of the hallway. I'll break out soon, and I'll kill more.
Senator, I'm sure you don't like the tone, but isn't it working? Republicans in red states say immigration is now a top issue.
I don't think it's working, Chris, because what the president is doing is driving away the independent voters and swing voters and a lot of moderate Republican voters in these swing states. Look, the president says lots of outrageous and untrue things, and there's another example right there. The reality is Democrats are for strong border security. We're against open borders. We're also against separating parents and their children, and it was pretty outrageous for the president to suggest the other day that the United States military would fire on unarmed people, and that the military had to tell the president that's not what we do. That's not what the United States military does. But the real thing going on here, Chris, is an effort to change the national conversation from what people wake up every day thinking about, which are their economic circumstances and primarily uncertainty over health care costs, and the fact that Republicans for the last 2 years have tried to eliminate protections for people with pre-existing conditions. That remains the top issue on voters' minds despite all the president's efforts.
Well, you talk about the economy and then you segue into health care, but let's talk.
So, yeah, that was the follow-up there, going into talking about other issues. Chris Wallace did not do any of the fact-checking that Jake Tapper did. In fact, seemed to be promoting the Trump administration message on that awful ad about the Sacramento cop killer, especially awful for me, because I live in Sacramento and I know all the details, and it's just pretty dishonest in addition to being racist and demagogic and whatever. Fill in your own adjective here, I guess. But that was the second of the 2 clips I wanted to show you on the Louis Bracamontes Sacramento cop killer issue. But before that Fox News clip, when I showed the Jake Tapper clip, I promised an additional Jake Tapper CNN State of the Union clip where he showed his nonpartisan fairness by pretty much grilling Thom Perez, the head of the Democratic National Committee, the counterpart to Ronna, Romney McDaniel. I'm not getting rid of her Romney. I still call John Mellencamp John Cougar Mellencamp. No, I don't know, whatever. Hillary Clinton is Hillary Rodham Clinton. Whatever. I don't know why. John Gacy is John Wayne Gacy. I'm on a middle name fetish. I have no middle name, so maybe I have a middle name fetish. So no, I'm just no middle name fetish. That was just a joke. That was a very strange joke. But the next clip I promised was where Jake Tapper was fair, nonpartisan, grilling Thom Perez about the hypocrisy of the Democratic Party when dealing with allegations against Keith Ellison, who I think is the vice chair of the Democratic Party, if I'm getting his title correct. And I don't know much about those allegations, but I do know that Jake Tapper makes the Democratic National Committee chair, Thom Perez, sound like one of those Republicans defending Brett Kavanaugh, like, well, she deserves to be heard and to have like a fair investigation, and we did a fair investigation by the Democrats who are on the side of Keith Ellison, and we decided that there wasn't corroboration. I mean, it sounds a lot like the defenders of Brett Kavanaugh, although I don't know the details of the Keith Ellison allegations, but if you do, you can let me know down in the comment section, and you can tell me if you think that Jake Tapper does a good job cross-examining Thom Perez. I think he does, and I'll talk about it a little more after we watch that 3-minute clip, 2 minutes 55 seconds together over here.
One of the most important movements of the last year or two is the Me Too movement and the Time's Up movement. Women standing up and saying, men can't treat us like this anymore. The ex-girlfriend of your deputy at the DNC, Congressman Keith Ellison, is accusing him of domestic abuse. Now, an investigation commissioned by the Minnesota Democratic Party was, quote, unable to substantiate the claim of physical abuse. Is that good enough? What do you say to women in the Democratic Party who say, why is this guy still the vice chair of the DNC?
What I say is that we should always take those complaints seriously, and we do. And that's why an investigation was conducted. That's why Congressman Ellison asked for a health ethics investigation. And Democrats have never hesitated to take action, unlike Republicans. And you know what? Part of why we are going to do so well on Tuesday.
Democrats have never hesitated to take action? Do you mean like in the last year, or do you mean historically? Because historically, I could go through a list of people.
Well, and again, you saw what happened in Senator Franken's situation. Democrats didn't hesitate to do something, even if it was difficult, because that was the right thing to do.
Okay, so you mean just like in the last year. You're not talking about Ted Kennedy or President Bill Clinton or, I mean, I only have a couple minutes left.
I've been, Jake, I've been chair of the Democratic Party for 18 months. And what I'm talking about is we have worked hard to make sure that we are a party that understands that when women succeed, America succeeds.
So you don't. So do you
Trump
think
is doing to women?
Do you think Keith Ellison's ex-girlfriend is lying? Then is that what you're saying?
I think Keith Ellison's ex-girlfriend deserves to be heard and deserves to be treated with dignity and deserves to have a fair and full investigation, and that's exactly what has been done. I also believe that when women succeed, America succeeds, and the agenda of this administration is an agenda that's making it much harder for women to succeed. And one of the reasons why Democrats are doing so well is that we're fielding candidates across this country. You look at the women who are running for office, and they're running for office around a platform of healthcare, around a platform of inclusion. When we have more women in the U.S. Senate, in the U.S. House, more women in governorships, more women across the board, we are a better America. And that is why you look at the number of women running on the Democratic side, and you look at the quality of those candidates. If 1992 was the year of the woman, 2018 is going to be the year of the women to the nth degree, because women are leading this, have led this charge to take back America. To make sure that our children can have an America that we can be proud of, an America of inclusion and opportunity for everyone.
DNC Chairman Perez, thanks so much. And as I said to your Republican counterpart, good luck on Tuesday.
Thank you.
So that was bipartisan fairness, and I think I pretty much criticized that clip or gave my non-criticism, my kudos to Jake Tapper before I showed it. And one thing I didn't say, though, is there was one real snarky follow-up that I really liked. Maybe my favorite follow-up question. Well, I actually really like a John Dickerson follow-up I'm going to talk about in the clip after next. But when Jake Tapper said that thing, well, you're just talking about Democrats being responsive to allegations of misconduct with women in the last year, right? Because what about Ted Kennedy? What about Bill Clinton? I'm running out of time, or I could give you a big long list. Well, he didn't say I could give you. That was a paraphrase, but Ted Kennedy, Bill Clinton. I'm running out of time. You know what I mean? That I thought was kind of snarky, and I laughed. Even when I watched the clips 3 times, I talk about that in a bunch of different shows. That I watched the clips when I watched the news shows. I watched the clip again when I capture it. When I decide to take it and capture it, and then I watched all the clips a third time when I'm watching them with you when I play them during the show, and every time, all 3 times, I laughed when Jake Tapper said that. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I found that very amusing when he said, Ted Kennedy, Bill Clinton, I'm running out of time here. I found that very amusing. That's just me, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, the next clip, speaking of good cross-examinations, I criticized Chris Wallace earlier for what he did with Chris Van Hollen in the Sacramento cop killer ad. But he actually did a fairly good job of cross-examining the Republican senator he had on, Thom Tillis, the vice chair of the National Republican Senatorial Committee. What, they couldn't get the chair on? They're Fox News. They're like the Republican mouthpiece. Well, anyway, Thom Tillis. And I think Chris Wallace did a pretty good job of cross-examining him about Republican hypocrisy on pre-existing conditions. And this is a 2-minute, 45-second clip I will discuss with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Taking us directly in the direction I wanted to go, which is health care, which Democrats are making their top issue. And here's former President Obama on the campaign trail this week.
When I was president, Republicans voted more than a dozen times to get rid of protections for people with pre-existing conditions. Last year, they fell 1 vote short. 1 vote. If they win this Tuesday, they'll finally succeed.
Senator, the fact is that the repeal and replace bill, which Republicans pushed repeatedly, significantly reduced protections for people with pre-existing conditions.
Well, Chris, that's actually one of the reasons why I think it was a courageous vote. The first thing we have to do is take out the underpinnings of the Affordable Care Act so that we can put a health care policy in place that's sustainable. What Senator Van Hollen failed to mention about rising premiums over the past few years is that we've significantly reduced the rate of growth. And one of the reasons why that growth has spiraled over the years is because of the Affordable Care Act. We want to replace the Affordable Care Act with a program that will work, that will provide people who have pre-existing conditions with health care, that will allow young adults under the age of 26 to be on their parents' health care policies, but something that will work, because if we continue down this path, we're going to have a health care crisis, not only among those who are serviced by the Affordable Care Act, but the broader health care market in this country is headed for disaster if we don't recognize we've got to fix it.
But Senator, and I've only got about 30 seconds here, I don't want to get too deeply in the weeds, that repeal and replace bill would have allowed states to get waivers from Obamacare and take people with pre-existing conditions and put them in risk pools where they would have to pay a higher premium. And your bill, yes, it says we're going to cover everybody with pre-existing conditions, but we're not necessarily going to cover the condition that they have that's pre-existing. So yes, we'll cover people who have cancer, but we won't necessarily, their insurance won't cover cancer treatment.
Even if some states opted not to cover or not cover in the way that we would want them to, I think they'd get unelected very quickly. This is a very popular policy with the American people, which is exactly why the Democrats are trying to create this false narrative that people in Washington and the state houses want to take it away. I simply don't see any path either on the basis of good policy or good politics. So people with pre-existing conditions are going to get covered, and our Republican majority that we're going to secure next week is going to work to that end.
Senator Tillis, thank you. Thanks for your time, sir, and we'll be following how the world turns on.
So what do you think? That was a pretty good cross-examination from Chris Wallace of Thom Tillis, the Republican, on the pre-existing condition issue, especially on the way Republicans have been very dishonest about all of a sudden, oh, we're protecting pre-existing condition, we're protecting people who have pre-existing conditions from insurance companies, and it's not true. The whole repeal and his answer there, I didn't laugh that time, but the first time I heard it, I did laugh when he said, well, that's the courageous thing about repealing Obamacare. We repealed it even though we know that it's popular. And then at the end he says, well, you know, you can trust us to not hurt people with pre-existing conditions no matter what we say, because it would be really politically unpopular for us to actually hurt those people. So no matter what we say, we're not really going to do that. That was that answer was ridiculous, and Chris Wallace did draw it out, so I have to give him credit for that, at least after the previous criticisms. But I actually really enjoyed this cross-examination from John Dickerson on CBS's Face the Nation. This is his last episode of Face the Nation, returning as the host while Margaret Brennan was on maternity leave. They actually showed a picture of her baby at the end of Face the Nation. She's going to be back from her maternity leave next week. John Dickerson, sometimes I've criticized him, sometimes I've criticized Face the Nation for being Fox News light, but here they had the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on, and John Dickerson asked him about Trump's decision to move troops to the border to protect us from the caravan. And I mentioned way back at the beginning of the show that I was going to talk a little more about how the military has pushed back against that. Well, that's in the premise of John Dickerson's first question, and then he has a follow-up about it, but then he saves his real, killer cross-examination follow-up for the second follow-up, because he lulls Mike Pompeo into a false sense of security. I used to be a criminal defense attorney. This reminds, when you're cross-examining police officers, this is what you have to do. You have to set them up with a couple easy questions, get them to commit, and then bam, you hit them with the fact you had all along after they've already committed. And that's kind of what John Dickerson did to Mike Pompeo. There's this Simpsons episode where Nelson, the guy who does the ha-ha thing, he talks about going to some concert and bam, second encore. Well, this is the bam, I can't remember what the concert was, but bam, second encore, when John Dickerson really hits Mike Pompeo with the killer cross-examination, which I'll talk about a little more after we watch that 2-minute, 41-second clip together over here.
About the caravan at the U.S. southern border, General Colin Powell said, I see no threat requiring this kind of deployment. He's referring there to the deployment of troops from the Pentagon. Retired General Martin Dempsey said it was a wasteful deployment of overstretched soldiers and Marines. What's your response?
It's a problem that's gone on too long. President Trump is determined to ensure that we have sovereignty of America at our southern border and that we protect our American border. As the Secretary of State, I've been very involved in working with the governments in Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and certainly the government of Mexico. And I've also had the chance to speak with the incoming government that is now 26 days out from taking power in Mexico. We've made clear to them they need to undertake every effort that they can to stop this illegal migration from entering the United States. And the President has made very clear they will not be permitted to enter our country unlawfully. If they want to come here legally, if they want to come here lawfully, that's the American tradition. It's the American way. We continue to be the most generous nation in the world with respect to immigration, but illegal immigration will not be permitted.
The charge here, Mr. Secretary, is that the president is thinking about this in political terms, and that's why he's done this deployment, all of this rhetoric this week. Do you think he thinks about it in political terms, this caravan, and how it might benefit the Republicans?
I've been involved in scores of conversations about stopping illegal immigration from Mexico, and never once has there been a discussion of the political impact in U.S. domestic politics. It has always been about securing the safety of the American people and securing our southern border.
So if that's never happened, why then did the president in a rally said, speaking about the caravan, did they energize our base or what?
The president's been trying diligently to get our foolish immigration laws changed since he took office. He talked about this in his campaign. Many of the challenges we face today with illegal immigration are because we have a set of rules, a set of laws that don't allow us to fully secure that southern border. The president is working through the proper process, the Constitution, political process, to make those changes to the laws. And he is very hopeful, I think, that when Congress returns in January, there will be a Congress prepared to support his efforts to secure our southern border. That's completely appropriate.
You would agree that the president thinks this is a benefit for his base, which he says has been energized by this caravan and his response to it. So it seems like he does see it as a political benefit.
As the Secretary of State, I want to talk about American national security. We are determined to secure the southern border, John.
Okay, I'll take that lack of a response as a yes. Final question, Mr. Secretary, is on...
I'll take your bogus non-denial denial as a yes, and kudos to John Dickerson for that cross-examination. I think I pretty much explained why I thought that was great before I showed it. The final, well, no, I have two more news clips, both from NBC's Meet the Press. One is a news clip, one is more of a commentary pundit clip. I usually don't show the pundits, but it's important as to why we can't really trust the polls. But first I want to show Chuck Todd questioning Chris Van Hollen, who you saw earlier, the Democrat in charge of getting more senators elected to the Senate, and he's a senator himself from Maryland. This is Chuck Todd talking about what Democrats have to win. There are 4 contested places where they have to win at least one, and here you'll see this is also where I talked about earlier, where Chuck Todd asked Chris Van Hollen about the Democratic moderate versus the Democratic progressive model, comparing Texas to Tennessee, and the original question is about Texas, Tennessee, Missouri, and North Dakota, where Democrats have to win at least one if they can have any chance of winning the Senate, which I will discuss a little more after we watch this just under 3-minute clip together over here.
It strikes me, I'm going to pick out 4 Senate seats. 2 are held by Democrats, 2 are held by Republicans that are all in red territory. And it strikes me, you got to win 1 to have a good night and 2 to even remotely talk about the majority. It's Missouri, Tennessee, Texas, and North Dakota. So Missouri and North Dakota, and then Tennessee and Texas where you're on offense, Missouri and North Dakota you're on defense. Is it fair to say you can't go 0 for 4?
Well, you can't go 0 for 4 in all those states. That's right. And that's not going to happen. We're not going 0 for 4. Let me just first of all say no one should ever count Heidi Heitkamp out. She was down more than 10 points 6 years ago, came back to win. Claire McCaskill also is always sticking up for Missouri, and she's known as a fighter for her state. And then in those 2 pickup seats, we have incredibly strong candidates who have also said that their job, number 1, is to stand up for their states, working with Donald Trump if it helps, but fighting him if that's necessary to protect the people in their states. So,
you know, Tennessee and Texas strike me as fascinating in this respect. They're both supposedly red states, and yet you have one Democratic nominee who's been comfortable using the I word, impeachment, and in Beto O'Rourke down in Texas, and he's within striking distance. And then you have one Democrat in Phil Bredesen who's been saying, no, 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 no. If you worry about party, I'm not going to win. If you vote the person, he's almost running as a centrist Republican in a state. And yet they're both in the same position. What does that tell you about where the Democratic messaging works best? Is it better to be a sort of a base progressive like Beto, or better to be this centrist like Bredesen?
Well, Chuck, it tells you that the quality of the candidate is really important, and their ability to communicate on issues that people in their states care about. And we have candidates in both Texas and Tennessee who are doing exactly that. As you say, different approaches. As you know, in Texas, Hillary Clinton got 45% of the vote. In Tennessee, she didn't get close to 45% of the vote. So, look, what you see in Beto is somebody who is working to really expand an electorate which can be expanded in Texas. In Tennessee, the electorate can't be expanded that much, although you are seeing larger turnouts than typical midterm elections. And in Phil Bredesen, you've got a two-term governor who really focused on the pragmatic art of governing, and he's been very clear. As I was saying, his job is to stand up for the state of Tennessee. He's talked about areas where he can work with the president, but he's also talked about areas where he'll fight the president, like the issue that is top of mind for most voters around the country, which is protecting people with pre-existing health conditions.
You know, Phil Bredesen and a few...
So, like I said, that's a good discussion of the moderate model versus the progressive model. And I guess I hadn't really thought Tennessee is a lot more red than Texas, but I guess that's true that Hillary Clinton did a lot better in Texas than Tennessee. That's why possibly Beto O'Rourke can be the progressive, but Bredesen in Tennessee has to be more of a centrist moderate Democrat. I don't know what you think about that. I thought that was a fairly good discussion. And then also whether you think the Democrats are going to take the Senate. That's like the third most likely outcome. If you answer this poll question here about what Democrats are going to gain control of, most likely outcome according to the polls is they'll take the House but not the Senate. Second most likely outcome is they won't take the House or the Senate, which will really embolden Donald Trump. That's like the nightmare outcome for Democrats. Third most likely outcome is a really big blue wave where Democrats take the House and the Senate. And then least likely outcome, I don't think anything, this would be really weird, is if the Democrats take the Senate but not the House. But you can vote what you think is most likely here. I put them in the order that is most likely according to the polls, but the polls aren't necessarily what you should depend on for reasons I'll explain after I show Cornell Belcher, a Democratic pollster, explaining himself, and then Chuck Todd says, sorry, NBC pollsters, but I agree with Cornell that maybe we shouldn't trust these polls for reasons Cornell Belcher explains in the last 1-minute news clip tonight over here.
We're missing this election, right? In 2016, the miss was missing a Trump surge at the end. If we're missing something today that in 2 days we'll see, what are we missing?
Oh, I think we missed in 2016 was the protest vote of young people. I think what we're missing is, I hate to say this because I'm a pollster, our polling numbers are not going to be accurate because we don't know what the heck the electorate is.
Because turnout's going to be so big.
Because, you know, I just got a text from the mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms in Atlanta, and she's saying they've never seen turnout like this. And Stacey is expanding this electorate. Look, the Democrats came 200,000 votes short the last time in the governor's race there. She saw that, and she started working to expand the electorate. And we have younger voters turning out at a higher pace. We don't know what the electorate's going to be. I don't trust any of the horse race numbers right now. And I'm a pollster.
Neither do I, Casey. Oh, I know. Shh, don't tell our pollsters. And I love our pollsters.
I know, Martin McIntyre.
I know. I have to say.
Tequila right now.
I'm a little nervous, too, because of this turnout.
Yeah, well, and Chuck, you know, the one thing I don't think we...
So, yeah, Chuck Todd and Cornell Belcher both saying they don't trust the polls. And that's the thing. Based on my personal experience with activists, I think there really could be a big blue wave. People are really enthused. Women are very upset. The people who I interact with are more activized. They're more activists than I've ever seen in many years of doing this kind of work. But is that my bubble? The people who I know that make me think. And the important thing that they were talking about there is that polls tell you what's going to happen with the likely voters. And there's been a lot of work put into bringing out the unlikely voters. So that messes up the model. So who knows what's going to happen? I kind of think that maybe there's going to be a big blue wave, but maybe that's my bias. The people I know, you can vote in like my poll, clicking on this link over here in the corner. Those are, excuse me, all my news clips. I did promise this bonus Dash and Sandy clip after I told my story of Sandy going missing last night. I took a day trip to San Francisco, went to see a comedian, left Sandy out in the yard, came home around 11:30 or midnight. Sandy wasn't there. She got out of the yard, missing. About an hour after we came home, she showed up. But it was a very, very worrisome hour. At least it's not really cold like you have in some parts of the country. This clip from this morning, the Dash and Sandy clip, shows how nice and warm and sunny it is in the yard. I don't know why Sandy ran away. She's back. It would have been a calamity, but it was just a 1 hour worry. Here's a much more idyllic setting with Dash and Sandy this morning for the Dash and Sandy clip before I finish the show over here. So Dash and Sandy were outside. You go get outside. You go vote. Maybe you can just vote by mail. You don't even have to leave your house. So that is the big final message of my show tonight. I saw I had Super Chat contributions, including a voting message at the end over here. Thank you for that support. Thank you for the supportive comments, the thumbs up, the patrons on Patreon, the PayPal contributors, all the people who support my videos in various ways. I will be back next week and for the foreseeable future. Maybe I'll have time to do some sort of live stream about the election outcome. I'll see if that happens. Can't promise that, but whether or not I do that, I will be back next Sunday and every Sunday for the foreseeable future, picking out my clips, interacting with the viewers, and giving my political analysis and media criticism every week, and then until I have reason to put up some other kind of video or my live stream next Sunday, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.